Good leadership is when you have someone who is able to deliver results against all odds. But most importantly, is also someone who can read their team well. People can do a lot, but we need to trust them enough to allow them to perform at the highest level. We also need to train them and coach them because you took the time to connect with them at that deeper level. You then understand what their trigger are, and then you can motivate them regarding that. There's a lot of the big egos in startups, right? So you learn how to navigate the big egos. You learn to focus on what actually matters, and you learn to do that very, very quickly. Otherwise, you're gonna fail. Being able to know you're vulnerable and being able to show that, that is one of the hardest things to do. Learn by doing and listen to people. Listen more than you bark out orders. Just listen to people because they will teach you a lot of stuff.
Welcome, I'm your host Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership and most importantly, about leaders. The guest of today is Ricardo Pascual. Ricardo is an expert startup founder. He has founded more than one company, and actually, he has a great experience, and not just as an entrepreneur, but also he started as a flight attendant and then sales management, and finally he joined the startup ecosystem. And actually, from this great experience, we have had a great conversation on what is needed today for him to be a leader, a successful leader. The conversation is about, of course, his endeavors as startup founders, but also about the struggles, about the challenges, about what is probably important for a leader beyond the strengths and beyond what we could call the superpowers of a leader. Ricardo is an amazing person. He comes to this conversation open and ready to discuss about everything, and that's really the way I like talking to people. And for this reason, I really hope to have people like him, and I invite you to subscribe to this channel to welcome more guests like Ricardo. I also invite you to follow me on social media, especially LinkedIn, and to check my website, Master UC, if you want more information about coaching or if you want to read more about leadership on my blog. Well, with no further ado, Ricardo Pascual.
I think good leadership is when you have someone who is able to deliver results against all odds. But most importantly, is also someone who can read their team well and can optimize the resources they have in order to deliver what they need to deliver from those resources. It's not an authoritarian type of leadership where you have the carrot and the stick. I don't think that works. It's more about understanding, okay, what's the best outcome we can have from this situation? How can I optimize the resources I have? And how can I get my team to perform at the highest level? So I think for me, that classifies as really good leadership.
So results,
Mhm.
team, that's of course the important part, and resources.
Yeah.
And between, examining all those three elements of your definition of leadership, what is the hardest part that you struggle with, if you want, in being a leader?
I think any leader, the biggest challenge is really getting to know your team well and being able to fully optimize their potential, right? And what I mean by this is this. Um, People can do a lot, but we need to trust them enough to allow them to perform at the highest level. We also need to train them and coach them. And as a leader, that's not always the easiest thing to do, especially when there's a lot of pressure for you to deliver on something. So if you're able to handle the pressure and then still talk at the right level with everyone in your team to deliver the best they can deliver, then you're a good leader. But that's not always easy to do. That's actually quite hard sometimes. And when there's a lot of stress involved, when there's a lot of time-sensitive matters to deal with, that becomes a big issue. And you might end up, screaming or shouting or something like that. But what I try to do, in situations like that is I'm not going to say I apologize beforehand, but I always tell people, look, even though our stress level might increase, even though the way we talk might change, the respect is still there. It's just sometimes you don't have a lot of time to explain everything in all little fine print. You just need to get things done and quickly. And I guess the way you talk with people at that stage needs to match. For example, I know you have a military, background, and I know you need to follow orders in a very specific way, and the communication needs to be very clear. Why? Because when it's not clear, there's room for error, and that's the last thing you want to do. Even though you might reduce the amount of words said, everyone knows what the full meaning of them are. And that's kind of what I try to do is if I'm in a stressful situation, I make sure that I use keywords that everyone recognizes.
Well, you said a couple of things very interesting. The first one is, of course, acknowledging that we are humans and we might be under stress. So it's not just you, it's also your team members.
Mhm.
Even something from they bring to work from their family, that there are situations. And of course, sometimes it's hard to manage that. And acknowledging that everyone has their moments, moods, and we are not always 100%, right? We have our ups and downs. Acknowledging this is very important. And the other part you said that when you were talking about the military, you're right. One thing that I have learned is that it's easy to give an order, especially in the military. It's like, do this. The challenging part is motivating. It's telling, okay, well, it's not just doing this. You need to understand why. So if you have time, sometime, of course, time is as you mentioned, is not on our side. Then you might frame the order in a way that, okay, I will let you know the why. Also because I'm curious about what you think about it, maybe,
Mhm.
but it's not now. It cannot happen now because these things have to happen now. So
Yeah.
let's have this conversation later on. So it's always an open door. At least that's my view of it. If you um, and what is the one thing that actually your superpower? Well, if you think about yourself as a leader, it's like, I'm so good at this. What is your superpower?
It's the superpower and also a weakness. I think it's my ability to connect to people. Now, a lot of people say this, and you see them as very outgoing and bubbly and all that. I'm not that outgoing, bubbly personality, but what I tend to be very empathic with people. So I tend to really try and listen to what they're saying, what their mood is, and all that, and connect at that level. And I think that kind of offers me a superpower, which is when you then try and motivate someone because you took the time to connect with them at that deeper level, you then understand what their trigger are, and then you can motivate them regarding that. Because some people are more about the way you say certain things, others are more about acting and looking a certain way. So once you understand really, okay, where do they fit into what actually motivates them, how can I engage with them at that deeper level, then I can then lead them to something. Because some people talk a lot and it's very easy to get them to do something. Other people are a little bit more shy, maybe a little bit more technical. And how do you get the technical people to actually get to the place you want them to be? Well, you need to understand what motivates them. You need to okay, you like this. Let's say someone is very obsessed with having everything organized and methodical. Then you need to tell them what to do in a methodical way because that's how their brain is going to process that information, right? But some other people are just go-getters. You tell them we need to do this. They don't even need anything else apart from we need to do this, right? So you need to know who they are and then give orders or give commands or guide them in the way that matches with their ways of processing things.
And I'm curious though, because when we talk about empathy, when we talk about understanding and establishing this human connection, is always the two sides. So I wonder, what is that you observe in you when you
Mhm.
are able to establish this connection, and when you feel or perceive from the others when they're understand they're heard and seen.
Mhm. So what I take from it, sorry, I didn't fully get the question.
So the first part is, what do you actually, when you are able to establish this connection, what do you see in you? What happens in you?
Well, I think in me it's more so if I'm able to understand what motivates someone or and the best way of communicating with them, that for me is the first win. because then I know, okay, I have a clear communication channel and I can communicate with this person to do something or communicate in a way that they will process it correctly. And then after that, for me, it's what's important is being able to, I guess, guide them in the direction I want them to go. Right. And for example, my past, I used to work along many years ago, and I told you about this as a flight attendant. Now, what's fascinating about that job, and any job where you have to deal with a lot of people, is that there are different nationalities, different languages, different mindsets, different emotions, all happening at the very same time. Now, if my approach is always the same with everyone, that's not going to work. The people are going to flip out because I, I'm then not a leader or a motivator of people. I then become another chess piece in that board, and that's not what I want to be. I want to be someone who is able to adapt. So what I will normally do in a plane, for example, is my speech and the way I would talk to people would dramatically change based on the instant connection I'll be able to establish with them. Sometimes they have a speech that's not very well organized, and I'll need to, I guess, dumb down the way I would, explain something. Other times you need to be a little bit more funny and crack a couple of jokes because that's how they respond to things. Otherwise, you need to be super organized and just really break it down. This is why this happens and that happened and that happened. So you need to establish that connection quickly, but when you do so, you also need to change your speech so they get what you're saying.
Absolutely. You need to adapt your leadership, your way to communicate to people. It's
Mhm,
not just if you're a flight attendant, it's always. And that's actually one of the trap. And I felt in the trap. You know,
mhm.
you think you found the right formula, the right combination, the right way of talking,
Yeah.
because you're successful with a team or a person. You think, oh, I'm gonna replicate the same things the same things I've done with this team with the new team.
Doesn't work. No.
And you find out, well, different team, different moment, different everything. I need to change and experiment and start all over again. And there is a lot of frustration coming with that because you
Yeah.
think you have the right answer and you don't, right?
But I think there's a way to deal with that I think sometimes people forget about it, which is we need to be flexible as leaders, right? And if we keep the flexibility mindset, and when we approach a situation, we say, you know what, I kind of know what works, but at the same time, if that doesn't work, I am able to find a solution, whatever that solution might be, even though I might not know what that solution is right now. Now, when you have this mindset, you completely change your paradigm in terms of, okay, I got this challenge. How do I fix this? That's okay. I'll find a way because I'm able to do so. Now, if I go with a fixed mindset approach to any situation, what will happen is I'll get into a challenge. And when I get into that challenge, because my solution might not be the correct one, I will fail. But if I have a flexible mindset, I can then change and overcome that situation. So that's always I always try to keep, a flexible approach on everything. It's like, okay, maybe this time it works, but maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, I feel confident in it that I'm going to find a solution. But
Right.
that's
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Also because as always, as I mentioned, you need to experiment. You need to fail to
Mhm.
learn. And talking about learning, I wonder if you have a great experience. What is the best way for you to learn something new about leadership or to improve your leadership skills?
I like watching war movies, but that's not always the correct way. I'm biased to a good movie.
Well, there might be some good inspiration there, but yeah.
There are some good movies about that, but ultimately what it comes down to is there are some leaders amongst us who have gone through very stressful situations. I like reading about their stories because I think that makes me stronger as a leader as well. Um, Now, going back to the whole topic of the military, I remember reading this many years ago about what makes a special forces operatives effective. And what they told was that actually we don't follow, there's not a single leader, there's multiple leaders, but everyone knows where they fit into the equation. Now, learning this, I realized one thing, which is sometimes I'm not going to be in a leadership position, and that's perfectly fine. But my role then, instead of being the leader, is the one that listens to the leader and enables for the team to work together well, right? And just having that realization really opened a lot of things up for me. So where do I get all this motivation? How do I get all the sources? I don't know, books, movies. It's, as long as you keep on learning and improving, I think you're on the right path.
Keep on learning, absolutely. And I was wondering, is there any book that you would suggest right now and on the spot?
Oh, this is a tricky one. Books. So books are always very complicated because it's always there's a book I quite like is it's called Mindset by Carol something something. She's a professor in the US. Um I need to look up her last name.
That's okay.
But she talks about this flexibility in mindset, which is if you go with a fixed mindset approach, you will fail, and when you fail, you quit. If you go with a flexible mindset approach, what happens is you go in and say, you know what, I might fail right now, but that only means I need to find something that works. That's all I'm getting is feedback saying this approach didn't work. Let's try something else. Now, when you have that mindset, things really do change for you, and everything kind of falls into place. Like you stop assuming that you failed or see yourself as a failure. You just see as someone who tried something that didn't work, and you need to change your approach, right? And that actually gives you a lot of power because you now have the power of knowing what doesn't work and knowing that you can create something new, and that might actually change the results. So why not try it?
Right. If you stop spiraling, in the thoughts, oh, I failed, I
Yeah,
failed, I failed, oh my God, I'm a victim, or oh my God, I'm terrible. This imposter syndrome that we have, this kind of internal saboteurs that we have. And that's when you are able to step out of all these thoughts, that's when you actually see opportunities. And it's not
yeah,
just learning, you see something else. And that's an important lesson that it's great. So, um, what is you though? Since you said that you like books, movies, what is if you have a role model? How would you describe it? Who is your role model? The one
uh,
person you will say, I want to be like that one.
that's a good question. Who is my role model? I think I have multiple ones in different areas of my life, because it's the way it is, right? I think in business, I'm quite biased to following the stuff that Richard Branson has done because I like the fact that he seems to be approachable. I haven't actually met him. He seems to be approachable. He's into trying to fix some issues. Yes, he created multiple businesses, but he created those businesses in markets that were ripe for disruption. So that's kind of someone I'm trying to emulate, even though I'm not even close to being there. Right? Not even remotely close to being anywhere near. Plus, I don't have a goatee, so that kind of maybe I should grow a goatee. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like a role model I like to follow because I think when I'm very eclectic, so I like doing multiple things and looking at someone who has done multiple things instead of just one single thing makes me feel more at ease and understanding, you know what, it's okay to try out different things. It's okay to, one day you want to open a restaurant, the next day you want to open a mechanic shop, and that's okay. Things like that. So
I'm with you. I'm with you. I think Richard Branson is really a great example of entrepreneurship. He's not, I mean, it's rich, it's incredibly rich, but he's not number one or whatever. I don't think he even cares. But what I admire of him is he's brave. I mean, he has done so many things. He has launched um, a company. He started with music. I think. Probably
mhm,
that was the. I remember those beautiful stores, and now they disappear.
yeah,
He's just flying in space, and he has so many. He has done so many things. Some failures, some failed, other have been successful, are successful, and that's where he is. And he's crazy in his own way. And as you mentioned, he seems approachable. He's not. He doesn't live on a pedestal, like
yeah.
above everyone else. I think if you meet him on the street or in a convention, he will be glad to talk to you. But you have an entrepreneurial spirit, right? You have launched a few startups, and you're actually a founder even now. What is that you have learned from the startup world?
Uh, well, I've learned a lot. I guess let me first explain my spirit, and then I'll tell you what I like about it.
Absolutely.
So my spirit is, I guess, since I recognize myself as a man, probably since I was 16 or so, is that I'm not one to take orders, and I'm not one to follow conventions, right? And this is a big problem Because when you have this type of attitude, it means that when someone says that's the way it should be, you then question, how come? This doesn't fit me. I don't like this. And then, well, because I said so. Okay, tell you what, let me go and create my own thing, and then I'll say how it should be because I want it to be different, right?
And
And
yet you like movies where there are a lot of people giving orders.
I do like movies where there's a lot of people, but it's orders towards a common goal, I guess. Because in a war scenario, it's immediate, right? You need to give orders and you need to get those results straight away. There's no room for discussion. There might be some situations where there is room for discussion, but mostly it's like, okay, that's the enemy, go fight it, boom, boom, it's straightforward. I like that. But I also like when sometimes you have, it happens every once in a while in the military where people refuse to follow orders because they use their own free will and initiative to think. But that, for me, only gives more eloquence to the leadership that is created within that military structure. For example, there's been many cases in world history where we didn't end up all being destroyed by nuclear weapons because the guy that supposedly would press the button, even though he had everything saying he'd press the button, now, hold on, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's think about this, right? And that's why everyone's alive today. So, from going back to why I like the startup world, so as a leader, I like the fact that we can trust in other leaders to make decisions and give them autonomy. As for me, as why I like being a startup and creating startups, it's more about let me do my own path, let me create my own things. And if I fail, I fail, but at least I tried. And I created my stuff. I learned why they need to exist in a certain way, and I'm happy with it. So that's kind of why I do the things I do.
Right, right, absolutely. Um, but once again, let me what is that you learn about the world of startups? What is the how what have you observed in the many years you have spent in the
I think
creating companies?
there's a lot of the big egos in startups, right? So you learn how to navigate the big egos. You learn to focus on what actually matters, and you learn to do that very, very quickly. Otherwise, you're going to fail. You learn how to create a bubble around you, so you don't listen to the naysayers, but you only focus on the people who actually might help you. And you also create a filtering system for this, which is not always easy. Because sometimes your friends and family might say one thing, but actually the market says something completely different. They might not even get what you're doing, but you're on the right path. So it's trying to find all these things, which is hard. And something else I realize is that as an entrepreneur, you're not just creating a product, you're also creating a different version of yourself. Because the person who started the company is not going to be the same. The person who founded the company is not going to be the same person by the 6 months in, 12 months in, a year, 2 years, whatever. They're going to be completely different, and that's okay. That's actually what you want. You want to grow with the company because you're going to learn new stuff. You're going to change your approach. You're going to make new connections, and that's part of the journey. And you should embrace that. And for me, that's actually quite rewarding because I know that regardless of what might happen with the business, with the finances of the business, I will have changed a lot, and that's okay. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
I like this what you just say because also the company will change. I mean, if you
Yeah.
because the company has to adapt on whatever the market needs, right? So it is a kind of I see like intertwined evolution. You as a founder, and if you have a co-founder as well, and the company change in an if you want it in a harmonic way,
Hmm.
right? So you really, I guess, some companies are successful because it's a very natural evolution,
Hmm.
and everything happens without much of resistance. We do resist to changes, it's
Yeah.
normal. But once you understand that the change is needed, then you'll accept it and you'll do it better. And talking about this, what is the you? I mean, a lot of startups are created every day all around the world, but not many survive the first year or so. What is the main problem that you have observed? I'm sure that you have an ecosystem of startup founders around you.
I think the main thing is this: you need to build for the market. The market will tell you if they want your solution or not. or your product or whatever it might be. That's ultimately what's going to happen. Now, you might be ahead of time and create something that no one else wants, and then they're going to park it until someone says, you know, it's a really good idea. Let's take that on board. And I'll give you a really good example of things like that. Let's take the Post-it, right? Simple Post-it. And when you look at the story of the Post-its, this was a failed product. Someone was trying to create a glue. The glue didn't work. They parked it. And then a couple of years later, they say, you know, let's use that, you know, not very sticky glue because we can put it in a piece of paper and use it time and time again, right? Awesome. So either the market will tell you now is the right time, let me go and buy this, or the market will tell you park the idea. It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means it's not, you didn't find the right product market fit. That's it. Ultimately, that's all that matters in the startup world.
Right. Yeah. You need to sell something. This is good. And that's actually one of the things, right? People fall in love, founders, they fall in love with the solution and they forget about the problem.
And they forget about the customers.
And they forget about the customers. They think they have the best solution in the world, but they really forget about selling it. And that might be too early or might be not just the right thing to think of. Maybe too small
or maybe too complicated. You know, sometimes I've met a lot of companies that they end up building this super complex thing that they think that's going to be useful. And then you go and talk with them and they say, well, yes, I can do it all in the tablet, but I'm using a piece of paper and I'll keep on using a piece of paper because it's just so much more effective. Why would I change to a tablet? And it's things like this that sometimes people don't even realize, maybe there's not a solution to be had there. So
the one thing that I appreciate about the world of startup founders is really this energy that they have. You know, and I've been talking with a few, and it's the possibility for each of them to shape the world in a way that they want, to create something new, and to shape it like they want, like they are. For whatever is important for them. They can bring it. And it can become something fantastic or not, but they can still do it. So, what is your vision? What is the purpose that you have with your company or in life that is driving your actions and decisions?
It's a really good question. I think it's a hard question to answer because, like everyone else, I have the same motivators. The whole wealth and being in a nice relationship and all that. I have the same motivators as everyone else. But I realized that's always been there's always been a common thread in everything I do, and that is people. Now, everything I've ever done in my life surrounds, even though I'm incredibly shy, goes around either connecting people or being an enabler of opening up people's minds. And that manifested itself either through some of the acting I've done, or now the businesses I'm running, which is one is an event company, the other one is Open Experts, which connects people with top experts from all over the world. And I realized actually this is my common thing is I want to connect people. I want to connect people from different cultures. I want to connect people that come from different backgrounds and just have them all have a conversation, because there's so much more in common than we think about. So I guess that might be my motivation, is like, how can I connect people? How can I make everyone kind of connect with everyone and everyone kind of be friends? It's a bit weird because we're not all going to be friends, let's be honest. But if we can sit down at a table and, at least listen to the other party, that's, long ways to go.
No, it's true. We cannot all be friends. But I'll tell you something. I think I never said that to anyone off mic or during this conversation. Every time I have a conversation like this, I feel a connection. That's the podcast brings me connections, and it's something that I enjoy. And I always hope to meet the people for real, in person, and have a cup of coffee or beer or whatever can be the best for the moment. Sometimes it's quite impossible because you're in London, I'm in Washington. Yep. I interview people from Australia, so it's even farther away. But it's always nice to establish this connection. The connection are really the basic. It's one of the pillars of success. Social fulfillment, if you want to call it like this. And of course, to different levels, but it's something that we all need to feel successful in our life, not just at work. Um, and that actually, what is important for you? What constitute an essential element in your work and life, other than social connections at this point?
What's important for me? I think it's knowing that the ones I care about are taken care of. They're okay. In a lot of fields. So I'll try my best to make sure that that's the fact with everyone around me. Sometimes if, for example, if of course you take care of your family and friends and all that, but I make an effort to make sure that they're okay. And the same goes for when I'm working to make sure that people around me are actually okay. I always say to people, look, family comes first. Let's talk about if I know there's an emotional issue first, that's the one I'm going to approach. I'm not going to let it, slide and say, let's ignore all your emotions. Actually, no, let's talk about them because these things are important as well. So that's kind of what I try to do. Is it right? I don't know, but makes sense to me. So that's what I always do.
Well, it's not about being right or wrong. I mean, it's something that works for you, right? It's you, it's just you, and that showcase what is important, what are the values for you, and surely family, friends, the people you care about, those are an important part. What is the one thing you had to compromise with in your career as a leader, and is still hard to digest?
Still hard to digest. Look, we all make. There's an interesting book or whatever from a guy called Brian Tracy, which is "Eat That Frog," and we all eat different frogs across multiple stages of our life, right? I think for me was for many years I was in sales, and I realized that actually, as good as I am convincing people and influencing people, if I don't believe in the company, it's not going to go anywhere. So having to eat the frog of saying I need to keep on doing this because it's going to pay my salary in the end of the month, that for me was like the hardest thing to do because I knew there was a better way. I knew I should be doing something completely different, right? And you do this year on, year on, and then you just realize actually let's try something else because this is not nor where I should be. And I think that's the hardest frog to eat when you keep on doing something that you're not passionate about, but it pays the bills. You make sure that your family is okay. You make sure that you're okay as well. And do you like it? No, but it pays the bills. Which then brings me to another topic, which is we should always try to be respectful with people working. Doesn't matter what they're doing, as long as they're all working, you need to be respectful. Am I always respectful? No, sometimes I complete moron. But 99% of the times I like to think, you know what? Let me be respectful and say, okay, what's happening? Why is this way? Or why are you not focused? Things like that. So
I think respect is for me my number one value. When we were talking the other day, we had a meeting with my team, and we were talking about values. I was like, respect is my number one. I always repeat that. And yet, once more than once, I felt I was disrespectful. I think one of the worst situation I found myself was when I was on a ship. I was the commanding officer on a ship, and I had a pretty harsh conversation with the executive officer, who's the second in command. And I think for probably the first time in my life, in my career, I really raised my voice to a level that was not measurable. And I felt so bad. I felt so. I said you cannot undo things. That's the once it's done, it's done. And I felt so bad. He was being an ass, but he still didn't deserve that, right? He did not deserve me screaming like a crazy guy. And there was, of course, there is always something behind that. It's a lot of pressure and stress and things, but yet you have a human being in front of you. You want respect, you show respect. You lead by example.
you lead by example, but that's not always the case. And I think you do flip out every once in a while. And I also think that us as humans, we can have two attitudes there. If we are the ones being screamed at, then we need to keep control of ourselves. So we show the other person, actually, I just won this argument, whatever the argument might be, because I'm now in control, because I'm still in control of myself, and you flip. So you're the one losing it. So you're the one in the wrong right now. So that's the first mental game you have. And then if you're the one flipping, because whatever reason might be, you also need to be, I'm going to use the term man enough, but woman enough, whatever it might be enough, to then go and apologize when the time is right to say, you know what, even though I'm right, even though you're wrong, I did went overboard. I didn't show you respect. This was too much, even though I'm right. But this is too much. So I apologize on the way I transmitted that information. But that's hard. You don't always get that opportunity.
No, sometimes you have to apologize, especially when, as you mentioned, you think you're right. At the end of the day, you think you have escalated. Yes, you were wrong, but at the beginning of the conversation, you were right. Even if it's hard. And yet, when you apologize, when you are able to really apologize in a sincere way, not just to do it, but because you feel it. On the other side, you always see surprise and because unfortunately it's not common, and there is openness, right? There is more like, okay, of course, we are humans, and of course it's the beauty of being vulnerable. It's the beauty of showing vulnerability as a leader.
That's hard, I think, because being able to know you're vulnerable and being able to show that is one of the hardest things to do for anyone. Because we always say, oh no, I'm super strong. I'm super strong. I'm more dubious of anyone who says they're super strong and unbeatable and invincible, that someone says, you know what? I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. You do have my vulnerabilities. That for me is a strong person because they have self-awareness. Whereas in the one that shows up super cocky and full of it, that for me is like it's easy to break into them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is a beautiful book from Brené Brown, Dare to Lead. It's all about leading with vulnerabilities,
Mhm.
and one of I think there are many lessons there actually to take. So I'm not gonna talk about the book, otherwise we're gonna spend an hour. But it's one of the books I really do recommend. Also because it changes this paradigm of the invincible leader, of the infallible leader, of the guy who says I'm always right, and he or she thinks that actually they are always right. It's not just because they say it, because they think it, and it's terrible to work with these people. I don't know if you ever had this experience,
Yeah,
but it's not pleasant.
it's not that never works for me, to be honest. When I see someone like that, I'm like, yeah, no, that doesn't work.
Talking about failures and vulnerability, what is the biggest failure or the wrongest decision you've taken, and sometimes you think about it and then,
The wrongest decision I've taken. It's that's a good question. I think I think when I look at wrong decisions, what I try to do is I ask myself at the time, with the knowledge that I had, was that the wrong decision, or was it a decision I was able to make to the best of my abilities? Because if I don't put things in perspective, I would forever hold them in the back of my mind, and that is an issue. But if I'm able to see, at the time, with the conditions I was in, with the way I was thinking at the time, that was the best I could have achieved, and then I'm okay with. But it's not always the case. I mean, sometimes you do make mistakes, and you say, at that time I was wrong. The biggest mistake, I don't know. There's been so many. There's always. I mean, it's hard to say it was this or it was that. It's more to say I've done many, but I found that the best way to deal with them is being able to put them in perspective and say, was this the best I could do at the time? Yes, no. If yes, then move on. If no, then analyze why and make sure that you learn that lesson very, very hard. So you're never going to make that mistake again, and make that promise to yourself.
are you gonna make, yeah, sure, generally speaking, not you, but you're gonna make more other
Yeah.
mistakes, hopefully not the same.
Not the same.
Hopefully new mistakes, new learning. So trying to wrap it up, since time, I mean, it was like it started 2 minutes ago, but actually, So what is the suggestions that you will give to a person coming to you and asking for some good recommendation to become a successful leader?
A successful leader. Learn by doing and listen to people. Listen more than you bark out orders. Just listen to people because they will teach you a lot of stuff. I think that's probably the things I would say. Also, if you learn how hard it is to actually do something because you've done it, you can then be a much better teacher than if you've never done that before in your life. Right? If you're asking someone, I'll tell you a true story. Long time ago, I was doing a theater play in university, and I had this magnificent idea of putting lamps moving up and down from the ceiling. We bought some lamps in IKEA, paper things with bamboo, very light. Let's all hang them from the ceiling. Now, the ceiling was about 20 meters high, or, it was a big theater, so the theater had room for 600 people. I don't know how many feet that is, but it's very high. And I decided, okay, let's get some scaffolding here. Let's go up the scaffolding and put it here. And then one of the guys there said, "Oh, I used to work in construction. I could do that." Okay, awesome. And he starts shaking a lot, and he says, "Ricardo, this is not going to work." I'm like, "No, this is going to work." Oh, it shakes. And then it's okay. If you think it's going to work, go and do it yourself. And of course, leaders go first, right? I went upstairs, 20 meters up, and it was shaking uncontrollably. And I was like, "Yeah, we cannot do this." So I learned by doing, and I didn't ask anyone else to go on top of the scaffolding because they can literally kill themselves. So yeah,
But you went upstairs. You did it. I mean,
I did it. Yeah.
you were not like just observer from down and say, no, you go there and do it.
No, if I thought it could be done, I wanted to go and show them that it could be done. Now, I'm not saying, go and, beat an Olympic champion or something, but this was something I thought any able-bodied person would be able to do. So I went and tried to do it, and I was like, actually, you can. So, backed away from it. And I said, "You're right." Again, you're right. This can be done. Let's try a different approach. So,
Right. Well, thank you for sharing this.
thank you.
Thank you for sharing this story about you and how you were able to learn from that. Actually, to learn by doing. And I really enjoyed this conversation. There are a lot of things that I'm taking away from the flexibility to the ego that is at the trap of the ego
Mhm.
for generally speaking business people, entrepreneurs, and startup founders. So thank you for having spent these 45 minutes with us, Ricardo.
Thank you for having me.
And
It's been a pleasure, Stefan. Thank you so much.